Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. On this Bad Beats episode, we will explore the human side of real estate investing with a seasoned pro about to make the legendary worst deal of their life. A deal isn't just the investment, it is also the person. Stay with us and learn what it takes to be the best investor. Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Royal Smith, the owner of Royal Legal Solutions, your one-stop shop for everything real estate and business asset protection. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Trevor Robinson. He is a phenomenal investor. I've known him to be one of the smartest tactical minds that I've had the pleasure of getting to know here personally in recent history. And Trevor, thanks for coming on the show here today. I understand we're going to share a couple of different stories, some best deals, some worst deals. What do we need to know about you, Trevor, for the audience, so they can get like a good foundation of who you are, going into these deals, so they'll kind of get a look inside your mind just here initially.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm a Midwestern guy, 32 years old, from the middle of Missouri, a college town, pretty typical normal guy. I was one of those that went to college and was very bored in class, so on and so forth, and was in business school and couldn't understand why I was taking on debt with basically no future after graduation with a generic degree. So from there, I dropped out, got joined in and partnered on a tattoo shop, didn't make a penny off it, lost money. The next endeavor I did was cell phone repairs and screen refurbishing, which turned out to be extremely lucrative, and I kind of lucked out into that. And I knew that I didn't want to actively manage or work. Basically, not work, but I don't want to actively be involved in day-to-day operations on pretty much anything that I do. I like to macro manage. So I knew the way to do that was to leverage my profits from the business into real estate. And that's how I got here. Kind of always knew I wanted to be wealthy, but knew I'd never cut it in the corporate world, and I would never be able to go through school and be a doctor or something like that. So I was always taught or, had heard that real estate is not a get-rich-quick scheme, but it's a get-rich scheme. And so I kind of always stuck in my mind, and I explored it from there.
That's awesome, Trevor. Yeah, I mean, I think it's what really makes your story pretty compelling is that, so many things like didn't work for you, quote unquote, didn't work for you along the way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like one of those things that I think a lot of people run into, and they feel like they're stuck and railroaded into a particular way that they have to live. Like, oh, I got to go through my school. I got to get this particular type of job. And you kind of like slough it off of being like, I had a couple of ventures that went bad and I totally dropped out of school and it's no big deal.
Yeah.
So I just kind of went with it. But I think a lot of people are probably afraid to do something like that, because they're afraid of what the downside would be. But it could be that the downside is actually much worse, and trying to live a life that you're not actually built to live, like trying to live in corporate America, which you're like, yeah, that's not me.
Dude, 110%. I mean, we could go have a 10-hour podcast just on student loans and how I think they're going to, basically bankrupt our youth. But no, you're exactly right. And I mean, we've kind of steered to an overeducated society in my sense, where we don't have labor. And so you'll see it now. That's why a lot of people come out and make, 30 grand a year out of college with 100 grand in debt. But we can't find an electrician or a plumber to save our life. So it's funny that you say that. And especially like the way I look at it too with school is, I mean, you can go to school at any age. When you have an opportunity to kind of strike while the iron is hot, or if you find a niche or something like that, like in my opinion, you have to go after it. I mean, if I fail, I can always go back to school, but you might as well go and try and take some risk before you do that. And that's kind of what I did, and it worked for me. And I know a lot of other friends that have kind of done the same. And in my opinion, unless you're going to be a specialized career like an attorney, an asset attorney, then there's really no need for you to go to college, or, a nurse or an accountant or something like that. But absolutely.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense if you need a particular title to do the type of work that you need, but just not for like information, And I think really love the way that you characterize like how you evaluate the risk there. Because like you're looking at risk is not like absolute risk, like, oh, it might not work out, which is what stops a lot of people from taking action. It seems like you're looking at risk as saying like, how easily could I reverse the situation if this doesn't work out and be exactly where I am today? I was saying like, yeah, I can drop out, I can try real estate, because my worst case scenario is I just pop right back into school. So what really is the risk?
No, for sure. And I mean, you can't be scared to fail. I see that a lot of times, and where people are, oh, he went bankrupt or he went belly up. And to me, honestly, I mean, it's not good to go out of business, obviously, but I look at that as sometimes positives. If you can fall and get back up, a lot of really successful people fail over and over and over and over again. But if you honestly have that drive to pick up and keep going, you're eventually, in my opinion, going to find what works for you and you'll be successful.
Yeah, I think so, man. And I think there's also another misnomer in here from doing this podcast with a lot of really, really great successful people that have failed and really had pretty blunderous investments in sometimes in their life, is that there's this misconception that when you shoot really big and then you fail all the way, like all the way down below ground zero from where you were before. And most of the time what I see happens is that people took like really big goals, they shot for the stars, and they quote unquote failed on hitting the stars, so they landed on the moon.
Yeah.
Like, that's still pretty damn good,
exactly.
with what I do.
And if you're diversified and stuff, like I'll still have projects that didn't go the greatest or weren't the best. But if I have that spread over 200 different projects or 50 projects, whatever, those others can make up for those losses. So I completely agree. It's not a black and white or absolute thing sometimes. And sometimes one person's failure would be another person's success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it just depends on how high you're shooting, right? If you're shooting high enough, right, even if you fail, you're better off than sometimes your friends that never they shot too low or didn't do anything at all.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what you're going to compare yourself with. But let's jump into talking about some of these deals here, Trevor. Let's jump into one of the bad deals. And what's the context around that deal about, like, who, what's going on before you even get in this deal, so we can kind of set the stage for what's going on in your life, your investments, and get a backdrop for that.
Cool. So cell phone shop, started that, leveraged the money into real estate, and started with basically formulas. So I'd use gross rent multipliers to value real estate, and then I'd kind of toy with rents to see, okay, can I get basically a good deal? So I do all add value investment, which is basically just saying I find rundown places or a place where I can add an extra bedroom, separate a house into a duplex, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I got started. And all those were really good deals. I also bought at a good time. Most of them were in 2014. You could still find little steals here and there. So my first bad deal I'd say I got into was a remodel, low income area, paid 82 grand for it. It probably needed $50,000 in work. So I'm about 135. That was what I gauged. It definitely went over that by about $10,000. And then that particular deal had burned down twice in the meantime. So because of it's a low income area, I've had a lot of the tenants typically don't take care of it as well as of a higher income area. That one, again, burnt down twice, and I probably spent more than I'd like to. Also, I don't, some people make a lot of money in low income, trailer park, that kind of investment, which have very high margins. The problem with a lot of those, in my opinion, they don't appreciate. And actually, a lot of them will depreciate. So for me, I would love to get out of that particular property, but I can't. Like, I'm too far into it, and it makes sense for me to just hold it and kind of take the loss. That's probably one of the worst deals I had. I would contribute it a lot to basically being young and eager. Like, I had the money and I wanted to spend it. So that was me 4 years ago, or when I first started. Now, like, I can be cool and collected and just sit in what I call wait with a loaded gun. So I can sit on my cash, have financing lined up, but if it doesn't hit those numbers, I don't want it. And I'm not pushing or manipulating myself to get there, if that makes sense. That deal, all I could see was the upside. I was blinded and fogged at that early age of investment that I couldn't see the downside at all. I was literally manipulating myself into buying it just because I didn't want to, quote unquote, lose the deal, which is something that I myself and a lot of investors deal with as well.
So it sounded like one of those kinds of things that it probably didn't meet your criteria initially to go into it, but then you talked yourself into the deal. Like,
yes,
that's
exactly right. I'm glad you brought it up like that. I would do that, talk myself into deals. So since then, I totally wrote off low income property. So I just X'd it out if I'm personally managing it. learn from that deal not to do that. And then it's just, I feel that your investments are a lot less liquid in that market than say if you're in kind of a nicer A or B property, if we're using a grading scale, that stuff easier to sell and get rid of. So yes, you're exactly right. It didn't hit my criteria.
I've heard of investors before talk about, a lot of my clients and some of the properties I've actually run into well, is that when you get into the lower income areas, you're trying to do personal management. If you're not, it takes like a certain personality to be comfortable and also to want to try to manage properties that are like that, because it can take a lot more energy. It's like much more of like, it can be a much more abrasive kind of transaction.
Yeah, you gotta be a bulldog.
Yeah.
So it's exactly, I mean, you're right in that some of those you have to be a lot more stern and assertive, and you'll have to deal with things you don't. It does take a certain individual. You're exactly right. Like when I picture someone that would be great in low income housing, it's like a stern East Coast guy that, doesn't put up with any crap, that kind of thing. So exactly, you're exactly right. It takes a very certain individual to handle Section 8 low income housing, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and there's a huge cost to that if you try to manage it on your own too, right? Which is you end up spending a lot of energy trying to trace a couple of dollars that are there instead of using that energy to find your next great deal, right? So you're trying to do something maybe that you're like not the best at. Not necessarily your situation. I'm just saying I find people that run into that where they're like, oh, I get this return, it's great. And it's like, well, how much of your time are you spending having to get that return? Because then it's not a true return once you average like all your time into it.
And let's think about it. Why are we getting into real estate anyways? It's passive income. At what point do you manage so much kind of that high maintenance property to where it's really not even like passive income anymore because you're dealing with it every day? So It's completely right on that. And that's why, I try and systemize everything, but there's certain things that you just can't get past in that demographic.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you turn that deal around? You just hold on to it and just keep cash flowing it and then get property manager?
I hold it and we do pretty well. I gross $1,900 a month off it, and I'm probably in it for 140, which really isn't bad. That's a pretty big flow. My note, which is just P&I, is I think $800 a month. So I have $1,100 left over every month, or $12,000-$13,000 a year pre-expense. It definitely flows, but it's one of those just everything. It's like the Money Pit movie. Like everything that goes wrong went wrong with it. And sometimes it's just like one of those you can't avoid. Also, like touching back to that, which I think is a really good advice for anyone that's a newcomer investor, is I don't recommend getting into low income ones because banking looks at the type of properties you hold. So your foundation of your portfolio is the most important part, because if you have red flag properties or properties that don't flow well, you're not covering your global debt, no one will want to give you money. If you have good B, working class or higher end properties and you have them and they're running well, the faucet's going to be turned on with lending and you'll be able to grow and make a lot more money a lot quicker.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that, about how you're shaping your portfolio strategically to be able to get the best financing?
Yes, absolutely. So like how I did it from the start, and I'll kind of walk it to you how I do it now. From the start, I went after duplexes in either, I would say, C+, B- areas, working class, mixed in with some housing, single families, good little ones like that. I would primarily target under rented ones. So, I bought places where there were, residential leases were 25 years old, which is, you can see they're under rented pretty bad. So what I would do is go in there, fix them up, and then raise the rents up. So I just had this tremendously high cash flowing property in a good area. Now at that point, I would either refinance them. So I would go, after I'd raise my rents, I'd refinance it, because everything's based on what you get in rents. So if I have higher rents, it's higher value. And a lot of times I'd take a line of credit against the equity and purchase again. And so I started off my foundation getting those, I'd probably 10 to 15, maybe even 20 in those really good areas. And then that's when I took a little jump and got into some small commercial and multifam, went into 4-plex, 8-plex, stuff like that. But it made lending so much easier because I was able to go to a bank and say, hey, look, these 10 I have, I'm at a 1.5 global debt. You guys only require a 1.25. So I'm doubling what they want to see. they'll pretty much lend to you within reason. Now, if I go in there and I have struggling properties that are in a crap area, I mean, your bank is pretty much your partner on the deal. If you're at 80-20, they own 80% of that property. They own more of it than you do in a sense, and that's how I look at it. So a lot of them don't want to buy that stuff just like other people would. So the better the property, the easier it is to be lent. Now I do a lot of construction loans on remodeling, and then I just refinance them at the end. So say I buy a property, Scott, what I'll do is I'll take it out on a construction note. I'm paying interest only. I'm basically borrowing all of the repairs and the purchase price in one. So I pay interest only while I'm on what I call, the phases or until stabilization. And once I get to the end, I'll use the new appraisal, and then I'll refinance that construction note into either a 20-year regular commercial note or whatever I can get kind of the best rate and financing on. And that's kind of how I go now. So most people ask me, oh my gosh, how are you at such a young age doing this? And a lot of it is I'm not coming into deals. Like I'm using another deal to leverage against it. And at the end, I've raised the value up so much, I try and walk out of deals with no money in them or very little.
Is that part of what makes that strategy successful for you, because you have a background in the actual flipping and construction area of it? Because I imagine that would be a limiting factor for a lot of people trying to do it. It's I don't really understand.
I'm the least handy person. I can fix cell phones. I can fix computers. I can hardly change a light bulb. But what I had to do was understand how construction is and learn when to, kind of vertically integrate, or just for, less fancy terms, do the work myself or with my own company, and when to sub it out to a contractor. I lost a lot of money on projects at first, not knowing what I was doing and kind of just jumping in head first. I learned a lot. I was able to adapt and learn from my mistakes and kind of cut those losses or not lose as much. But I mean, yeah, that's basically, I learned from doing it and then trying to talk to other investors. So I always tell people this, and I love helping people out. I'm not trying to sell a book or anything. I'm just passionate about real estate. Everyone, when they go to the blackjack table, they want to tell you about that night they took the dealer for $2,000, $3,000. Nobody wants to tell you about that time they went and blew their whole paycheck like an idiot. Maybe had too many beers, spent their money. So it's kind of the same thing. When you talk to guys like myself or anybody, don't be afraid to say, hey, I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. Can you tell me some things that kind of slowed you down or what hurt? And that's where I've helped out a lot. Is basically I like losing other people's money mentally. So I'd rather hear about how you blundered a deal and then know not to put that into what I'm going into next. That's helped me a lot, especially starting after this last recession. I'm young. A lot of old guys say, well, you've never been through a recession before. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's well, yeah, I haven't, but I sure like to listen to your stories about it so I can kind of be prepared for when that next swing comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually what Real Estate Nerds is really founded on, is about being able to try to learn the lessons from other people, right? So we don't have to learn them on our own. That's part of it. And that's why it makes it, I think, something that's worthwhile, is because that's how you actually save big dollars.
Yeah, absolutely.
The education,
there's a couple books that I've read that literally I bet have saved me millions of dollars in loss just because learning from the other people's. And those are the best books you want to read. You don't want to read the get rich quick schemes that I did this, I did that. You want to hear those humble books about where somebody might have lost it all or what they did wrong, so on and so forth. But those are
What
great
books are those?
My favorite book, man, and I should probably get a check from him, is Manny Koshbin's Contrarian Playbook. This book is the best book for new investors. It is written at probably, an 8th grade level, and I mean that as a compliment. He dumbs down the deals so anyone can explain it. So when I hire on new agents or property managers or really anyone that just wants to better themselves financially, I have them read that book. I'd say for a mid-level, if you're listening to this and you've already got 10, 15, 20 units and you've got a pretty good grasp, it's called Confessions of a Real Estate Entrepreneur. That one is a little bit more hefty. There's some chapters where even I'm whoa, what's that mean? Do I need to contact my attorney friend or an accountant? So on and so forth. But they bring up, that guy also talks about a lot of losses. He was an attorney like you and a developer as well. So he's he writes like an attorney, or it's more articulate than the other one.
Gotcha. Well, those are awesome books, man. I'm always a huge fan of and a proponent of people reading. I mean, it's like the lost art of acquiring information is like you pick up a good book and crush it.
For sure. There's a good mix. I mean, that's how like we connected was Reddit, which is like the new age of investing. And I talk to a lot of guys off Reddit. That's probably your best new age tool because it's not commercialized really. You almost get downvoted or banned if you start to try and promote your own book. So I'm in there, I'm probably mentoring 10, 20 guys at a time on that kind of stuff. But also same thing, there's some great old books, that you can really learn a lot from. So it's almost, I'm glad you put that up. We need to hybrid it. There needs to be a mix of both.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really enjoy it when interacting with groups of people and encourage everybody to try to find like a group that you interact with that one, you like talking to, and two, has like a similar base of knowledge, so everybody's kind of speaking the same language to each other. Like they've read, some of the similar stuff, they're doing kind of similar types of deals, and that'll give you like a good baseline for it. So that's awesome that you're, engaging on that platform. Did you want to go through, Trevor, one of the better deals that you've done, or what's your best deal?
So my best and luckiest deal was, and I hope the college isn't listening to this, but I saw our local college expanding a certain way, and I held property there. So I boxed them in. Like physically, like I guess, geographically, I boxed them in and bought in between themselves and mine in the college. And then I just went and turned around and flipped it to them. So I had a purchase price of $550,000 and I sold it 2 weeks later with no commission, no closing costs for $650,000. So that was probably like my easiest deal. I guess like there was some strategy to it and I'm probably underselling myself, but I was pretty lucky too. Like I knew that colleges, anything that involves a board or a committee moves a whole lot slower than you. So if you're an investor, that's something you should always think about. Look at schools, state entities, things like that, and where you can see growth coming, buy around them. They're going to want to get you out of there, and they can pay, and a lot of times they'll pay you more than they should. I sold that same college some more property, and I marked it up, 40% of what I had paid for it a couple years. That was probably my best deal that, I kind of just lucked out on, or was at the right place, right time. The most calculated was an apartment complex I did, and basically on an income approach. So like when they're valuing anything over basically like 6 to 8 units, they use your income. So I found the probably most rundown apartment complex in the best area. The rents were averaging $660. I was able to put about $20,000 a unit in, maybe a little bit more, about $1 million, I think 1.2 million, 1.3. So my purchase price was 2.7. I put 1.3 in it. So my total buy-in was $4 million. Now I raised the rents up to 1,100. So on an income approach, I think it valued in at like 5.6, 5.7 million. So that was probably my biggest actual gain in just making money. It took 2 years, but I was able to pull out all of my cash out of that deal. So it took me 2 years. Definitely some sleepless nights and pulling my hair out, figuring out how I'm going to get this done. But upon stabilization, now I own an asset that's worth close to $6 million, and I don't have a penny in it.
Well, how do you, what is that part of what do you attribute that, as I should say, is to your mindset around it to be able to have that kind of patience, right? I think a lot of people are thinking, hey, it's like slow term, I'm cash flowing it, I'll hold on to it. If it goes up, that's great, but I'm cash flowing. So, I'm going to be okay up or down. And where it sounds like some of the deal you're doing there, like, oh, I'm pulling my hair out, I'm still waiting for 2 years. Like that sounds like you have to have quite a bit of, grit to make it through that type of investment. Is that right or no?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes like real estate is not short-sighted. Some of this stuff, which I've never done it, I flipped a house and a condo, maybe another one I'm forgetting about it, but most of my stuff is buy and hold, or if I can sell it for, obnoxiously amount more than what I paid for it, I'll do that. But what I look at is more like, some of my deals, dude, they're not going to be profitable for 3 or 4 years. But the thing is, I can take all those losses on my taxes, which is why a lot of people get in real estate anyways. And those, if I'm waiting 3 or 4 years on my cash, I'm waiting to have huge, massive returns, or basically like a big asset in my portfolio like that. Like once you get one apartment complex or something, it's so easy to kind of borrow against that or use that to help to get other stuff, or just pull lines of credit if you want to sit and wait for the next recession, things like that. That's kind of what I'm doing now. But real estate is not, and that's one thing that I've learned, and I learned more and more, is that it's not that one-dimensional. There's a guy making a killing off the trailer park. There's a guy making a killing off Park Place, and there's about 1,000 plays in between or more. So the older I get, the more I'll actually diversify my real estate. So at first it was duplexes, single families, duplexes, single families. Well, then I bought some office space. Then I bought, some of this. Then I had money to play with flipping and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how I just look at it as a lot less one-dimensional, and there's other avenues.
So when you're looking at all of these different plays that you can do, a lot of times we see people like swimming outside their lane, so to speak, and that's how they end up losing a bunch of money. It's because hey, I'm used to doing the duplexes and whatnot, and now I'm going to go ahead and jump to do an apartment complex. But an apartment complex is a very different deal, where the upsides can be a lot bigger, but also if you screw it up, you can also get a hell of a lot of trouble. So what were you doing whenever you're venturing into a new asset class to ensure that you're checking the boxes correctly to make sure that you're not making a mistake? Do you bring in a mentor to be able to partner with on your first couple of assets anytime you do something new? Or
great question. Kind of like two parts. What I look for, I'm very particular, or almost have a checklist, or I'm very formulaic. I use formulas for everything, how it is. So when I go into those other ventures, one, I learn how they're valued. So what is the cap rate they're using? What are the expenses that you see on average? Obviously commercial that's triple netted or has, the tenant paying every expense, you have a lot less expenses than a low income apartment complex. So learning those, and basically the calculations. But on to the next point, which is a great point. I mean, I've got an appraiser in town that I just tell him, I say, hey, because a lot of times people don't want to tell appraisers what they paid for it, what the banks, people are very private. I tell this guy, anything you want to know about anything I own, because sometimes they'll be next to stuff he's appraising, I'll tell you the whole deal. And I said, in turn, when I have questions about learning this stuff, let me know. He's so cool and helps me so much. I can just call him. He'll explain how to value that. If you're looking at it, use this cap rate, use this expense ratio, so on and so forth. My appraiser has actually become a really good friend in business, where it's super helpful. Always you have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, which sounds odd because I'm talking the whole time, but always listen to other people, man. Always listen to, your attorney, your accountant. They'll all tell you different things. My two best friends in business, appraiser, my banker, and my insurance guy. I can pretty much know what my expenses are at any time, and then I can get an insurance quote. I already know what my principal, interest, taxes will be, and then the appraiser, we kind of use those for the expense ratio. And with that, you can gauge what anything's worth.
No kidding.
Networking with people like you and others. Talk to other investors, find people like myself, go to Reddit and go to the real estate investing sub, go there and you'll find a ton of different people that have a ton of different approaches, and you'll take a little bit off everybody's plate.
No, that's fantastic. And so just to recap on that, you were talking about the most important people for you are going to be your banker, your insurance guy, and your appraiser. Is that right?
For myself, yes, that helps me value deals and kind of know what different markets are. If I'm going out of market, say I want to go down to Austin, where you're from, I'm going to call, instead of calling agents and stuff, I'll call an appraiser and say, hey, what's your cap rate going down there for a multifam? What about office space? What about B-class single family? You know what I mean? And they'll give me all that, and then I can go into a market pretty much fully loaded.
And so it's just being able to grab that information from knowing what the appraisers are going to do is going to tell you in turn how the banks are going to look at this particular piece to know whether they're going to turn on the faucet or not for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to know exactly how they're going to feel about it. When I go to the bank, typically I already know without asking them, they're going to approve the deal. If I can show something that just has a huge cash flow or performs better than market average, I'm going to be able to get that deal done.
And the insurance person in there is really just going to tell you what's the extra expense that you wouldn't otherwise be able to know from the loan rates, essentially, right? And loan and cap rates.
So holding costs is another thing. I mean, I just want to know where I'm at. So with the Zillow calculator or anything, I can calculate P&I. Well, I own in Missouri and I own in Florida. Missouri has awesome property taxes. They're really low. Florida does not. Same with insurance. There's not a whole lot that can happen in Missouri besides like a freak tornado. You know, in Florida, you have flooding, so on and so forth. So those are important, especially when you get bigger and go out of market. You know, you'll need to learn. Like if you go buy in California or something and don't think about, or Florida, you don't think about the tax rates, you know, you pay significantly more. Same Texas a little bit. I noticed Texas has higher property tax because they don't have income tax. You know, the government will get you either way. It's just however they classify the tax. So, you know, I've noticed that in areas with no income tax, property taxes are significantly higher.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's good. And you're pulling a lot of that information around what you're doing with the taxes just simply through doing your Zillow calculations and looking at some of these online tools to be able to just do quick spec work on what do the numbers have to look like.
Absolutely. And I like we have a little thing like going hybrid here. We're old school, new school. Old school way, which I've gotten some huge deals on, I write people from the assessor pages. So tax documents and stuff online, all that, deeds, they'll show you who owns that property, or at least the mailing address and LLC. I've written letters and a lot of people said, dude, that's stupid. You'll never get there. I scored one of my best deals just writing handwritten letters that I wanted to buy their property. So that's another really good lead system for a lot of you guys trying to come up. If you've already got a 1 or 2 single families or duplexes in an area, you want to get more, start writing the people around you. And you'll notice the same name might have 3 or 4 in a row. Those are the deals to go after. Those are the ones that are going to make you the big money.
And why do you think that those are the ones that make you the big money? Just because now you're controlling a bigger block of the real estate, so you have better control over the whole scope?
One, expenses start to lower when you own more condensed. You know, you send your, you know, if you have 20 houses spread out and you're getting each of your lawns mowed, that's $30, that's $600 every week. Now, if I've got 30 in one area, you know, I'll either have one of my guys mow them or start my own mowing company or crew to supplement income, or I'll just, you know, it lowers your basically your expense down. Also, I'm changing filters going through. It's a lot faster and a lot easier.
Yeah.
And you can kind of leverage them together more easier too, I've noticed, than lending.
Yeah, and you can batch them. You can batch all the work together with it, right? And you're controlling like a bigger section of the real estate. So say like if this is like an appreciating area, or if I want to do improvements, I can improve my building and also know that all the rest of the buildings can improve too. And I just don't have like some really bad buildings that are going to bring my property values down. You get more control, right?
Yeah.
With everything. That's awesome, Trevor. I think we're just about out of time here today. So I always like to recap with just like a lesson learned from the interview today. And one of the pieces that I think is a really good takeaway for myself is really about saying like, okay, how can we do some hybrid pieces into, you know, what do we think that we're actually doing here? Like not all of the old school methods are bad, like those can still be used, but there's also some, you know, new technology around saying like, how can we quickly price out a property by using an insurance guy and using your banker, using your appraiser to be able to get those numbers, as well as, you know, going onto resources like Reddit, you know, and the real estate investing like Reddit. So I've been on Reddit for a long time, and I got to tell everybody here that might be thinking Trevor's like, oh, what are you doing, you know, on Reddit? It's actually it's such an amazing community of people where you can crowdsource all kinds of information, where people just sitting at home for some reason all like to get together and share info together, and it's totally free. And you find some really, really smart people that are on there that are just looking to connect and talk and maybe you never meet any of these people face to face or even pick up the phone, but they'll, you know, really be able to help you as long as you're somebody that's actually contributing value to the community as well. So I think that's an awesome lesson there. What would you like the audience to walk away with from your interview here today, Trevor?
Goals change at all times. I remember when I thought it'd be crazy to have 10 units. I got those 10 units a lot quicker than I thought. I said, holy cow, no way I can get 50. I got 50. And then at about 100, I said, you know what? Whatever I want to do and whatever I want to put my mind to will be easy to do. Start small. I mean, it's really not that hard, and basically network too. I mean, you can find me on those subreddits on real estate investing. Ask people. Don't be afraid to network, and, you know, don't be afraid to take risks. If you've been thinking about starting that business, maybe don't quit your full-time job, but start doing that stuff on the side and try and just, you know, it's not that hard, and lean on other people. It's not easy, but anyone can do it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, get your side hustle going. Get used to doing your business, right?
Yeah.
And get in there, you know?
40 hours a week is part-time until you have enough passive income to do what you want.
Yeah, and it's a different world once you have that passive income, because you're talking about, you're talking about then being able to make your own decisions in your life, or how do you want to be spending your time and what's important to you.
And I've got a lot of cool toys, I've got nice cars, things like that. The best thing is that I don't have to answer to anyone. And when it's nice out, like today, like the sun came out, I'm going to go take a walk in the park, man, and just enjoy my day. And a lot of times you can't do that if you're behind a cubicle. It's not necessarily the materialistic thing, but it's the freedom to kind of do as you please.
Yeah, that's the time freedom is the new currency, right?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, right. It's like we already probably have more stuff than we really need. We already know after we hit certain income levels, we're actually not any happier having shinier toys. But like having time freedom and location freedom, massive difference.
To give it away to others, and to not do it because I want you on my book or I want you to buy my subscription to a website, but just saying, hey, 2 dudes sat me down in a hotel for 3 hours and let me ask them anything I want and taught me these formulas. And all I have to do is give it away to other people. So it's kind of that cliche saying, the only thing you got to do to keep it is to give it away. So I love helping other people. If you're listening to this and you start becoming successful, always be sure to help the people under you and always take care and listen to the people above you so you can learn.
Oh, awesome. Great parting words. And Trevor, for anybody that is listening to you today and they want to connect with you or, through what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Email me, Trevor Robinson at live.com, TrevorRobinson at live.com. Just shoot me an email, put in the subject line, like, real estate or investment or something. And I'd love to help out anybody, no strings attached.
Yeah. I know you're always putting together deals and always super active. So I think that there's probably a lot of value for people to be able to grab just in contacting with you. And I know Trevor's, he came down here into Austin and we got to meet up here, and he's always scoping, where's the opportunity at. So I've known him to be somebody that's always on the cutting edge of saying, like, where's the deals at? How are we going to find them? What's that going to look like? And being very methodical with it. So that's a huge value, guys. If he's willing to just talk with you about it. That's some stuff that I can tell you right now. That's some high level conversations. I mean, you've heard it today on the show, and I would expect that to continue. And I don't think Trevor even does professional coaching or any of that.
No,
he's just a good old honest guy, trying to help people.
High school education. I'm just work my ass off and definitely am methodical, just like you said. But it's been great talking to you. You let me know if you need anything, and then we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Trevor. As always, guys, this is the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Royal Smith. I'm the owner of Royal Legal Solutions, your home for everything real estate asset protection. Thanks so much for joining in, and we'll see you guys again soon.
That's all for this Bad Beats episode. I'm your host, Scott Royal Smith, with the Real Estate Nerds Podcast. Did you see yourself in any part of that story? I know I did. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review to help clue in the sleeping masses of what they need to know and what we all need reminders of. Do your good deed for the day. Thanks, and I'll see you again soon.